Some say it was designed in the 1960s, and somehow, like a miracle, it is still being built today. Some say it's been traded for barrels of oil, a pile of gravel, and one entire bridge. Some say it's been gifted to nations as a form of aviation-based goodwill. Its manuals claim it can perform miracles. Its reputation suggests it can barely perform at all. And do you need spare parts? Forget it. It has been blamed for airport chaos in the Philippines, the collapse of airlines around the world, the near death of tourism in a Pacific island paradise, and it ended my career as flight instructor in Malaysia. So what is this mysterious, cursed flying machine? All we know is it's not an ATR, so stay tuned. Hello aviators, how are you today? My name is Magnar Nordal, I'm an airline captain and instructor. Through the years we have seen aviation touch the sky with marvels of engineering, and then nosedive into history with the grace of a falling piano. We have the legends, the Piper Cub, the eternal DC-3, the endlessly forgiving Cessna 172, the mighty Boeing 747, and of course, Concorde, the supersonic swan that flew faster than your brain could process lunch. But then we also had the disasters. The Christmas bullet, which killed both its test pilots, the Bristol Brabazon, which was big enough to host a football match but couldn't make it across the country, the Beechcraft Starship, too cool to succeed, and the Tupolev 144, also known as Konkorsky, because it looked like the part, but flew like a jackhammer. And then there's today's subject. Not just a failure, not just a disappointment, but a flying catastrophe wrapped in aluminium and denial. Ladies and gentlemen, meet the Xi'an MA60. The Xi'an MA60 is a regional turboprop airliner built by Xi'an Industrial Corporation in China. The MA in its name stands for Modern Ark, a branding approach similar to BYD's Build Your Dreams. It is equipped with Western-made engines and avionics, similar to those in the ATR-72-500. Entering commercial service in 2000, the MA60 was designed to carry up to 60 passengers, which is reflected in its name. In 2008, Xi'an released an upgraded version, the MA600, with modernized avionics and an improved passenger cabin. Despite its potential, very few MA60s have been delivered, and several factors have limited its adoption. While the aircraft incorporates modern components, its design is based on the older Antonov AN-24 from the 1960s. This gives the MA60 a heavier and less aerodynamic airframe compared to newer aircraft. While the MA60 is built like a tank, rugged, durable, and well suited for short and unpaved runways, it has developed a poor reputation for safety. However, this reputation is more driven by emotion than hard facts. Though there have been incidents involving the aircraft, none were directly caused by the flaws in its design. The only fatal crash occurred during a missed approach when the crew lost situation awareness, leading to a crash into the sea. As the MA60 was designed and built in China, it never met the certification standards of Western agencies like EASA or the FAA. Xi'an never pursued these certifications, as the aircraft was aimed at other markets. This lack of international certification contributed heavily to its reputation for being unsafe. However, the real issue with the MA60 isn't its safety record, it's the lack of customer support. And that's where Indonesia comes into the story. Merpati Nusantara Airlines, a state-owned carrier in Indonesia, was founded in 1962 and operated until 2014. In 2010, I was sent by ATR to the Merpati training center in Surabaya, tasked with teaching a group of flight dispatchers about the ATR 72-500. A few years earlier, Indonesia and China had signed a deal for 15 MA60s to be delivered to Merpati, a move that seemed promising at the time. However, after receiving their first two aircraft, Merpati decided to halt further acquisitions. The airline cited poor reliability and long delays in receiving spare parts as the main reasons for the decision. The dispatchers shared that issues with the hydraulic system often kept the two MA60s grounded for long periods. Therefore, Merpati ordered a second-hand ATR-72, but what was meant to be a solution quickly turned into a disaster. The aircraft had been purchased from an African country where it had been stored outdoors for years, exposed to the elements and accumulated dust and corrosion. After being ferried to Germany for repairs, it seemed like the ATR could be salvaged. But that wasn't the case. During the ferry flight to Indonesia, the plane developed a host of issues, far more than anyone had anticipated. I later spoke with an engineer who had been on that flight, and he told me the full story of the ordeal. Eventually, the aircraft made it to Indonesia, where my good friend Harald Solheim was sent by ATR to conduct flight training with the Merpati crew. However, in a full month of training, they only managed to fly once or twice. The aircraft had so many problems, thanks to years of neglect in a tropical environment, that it became a hunger queen. Harald, on the other hand, got to enjoy an extended holiday in Bali. But I digress. Back to the MA60. Merpati, being a state-owned airline, was essentially forced by the Indonesian government to take on the new MA60s. Indonesia had its fair share of challenges with airline safety, and Merpati was no exception. Just 1 year after my visit, Merpati suffered a fatal accident. An MA60, while approaching Kaimana Airport, crashed into the sea, sadly killing all 25 people on board. This accident sparked a lot of debate about the safety of the aircraft. Does it sound familiar? However, after the investigation, it was concluded that the primary cause for the crash was loss of situational awareness, leading to a loss of control. Contributing factors included inadequate crew training and poor crew resource management, CRM, worsened by a steep authority gradient in the cockpit. The 2011 crash was the first and only fatal incident involving an MA60, and it marked the beginning to the end for Merpati. In 2013, another serious incident occurred when an MA60 made a hard landing at Kupang Airport. The first officer, who was the pilot flying, selected reverse at 90 feet before touchdown. The aircraft hit the runway with a vertical acceleration of 5.99 g, causing the wings to partially separate from the fuselage, which broke in two. 25 people were injured. A contributing factor to this incident was a revision Merpati's instructors had made to the aircraft's normal checklist. Earlier, they had encountered problems with the power lever lock, which is designed to prevent reverse from being selected before landing. It would not open automatically after landing. This system is known as the idle gate lever in ATR aircraft. The instructors in Merpati decided to add the following to the checklist: open a power lever lock. This made it possible for the pilots to select ground idle and reverse in flight, which is not a good thing. The first officer involved in the Kupang incident was a Malaysian citizen. This, along with other incidents involving foreign first officers, prompted Indonesian authorities to impose a requirement for foreign pilots to have at least 250 hours on the specific aircraft type before being hired by an Indonesian carrier. This new rule had significant consequences. While Indonesia had a high demand for new pilots, local flight schools couldn't produce enough to meet that need. On the other hand, Malaysia had an oversupply of pilots, but in order to work for Indonesian carriers, they needed a type rating. At the time, I was an instructor at ETOPS Malaysia in Kuala Lumpur. providing ATR-72 type rating for Malaysian pilots who will later join Indonesian carriers like Wings Air. The new regulation effectively cut off this pipeline of pilots. And I lost my job as ATR instructor in Kuala Lumpur. Thankfully, my employer found alternate opportunities for me. But that's a story for another time. One final note. During the training course at Merpati, the dispatchers shared their experience attending a similar course in China. They revealed that the manufacturer had told them that the performance data in the MA60's manuals had been exaggerated and could not be relied upon. And that brings us to the Philippines. "17 years ago, ATR sent me to the Philippines to work as instructor for Cebu Pacific Air. They had just gotten their first ATR-72s, and I was there to help get things rolling. Now, if you know the Philippines, you have probably heard of Boracay, a famous island paradise. The closest airport is Caticlan, and back in 2008, it was a real challenge. The runway was just 900 meters long, and to the east there was a hill that made things even trickier. You needed a 4-degree gradient to clear it safely on takeoff or landing. With a 10-knot headwind, we could only carry 40 passengers if we had to depart over the hill. When we took off in the other direction, we could squeeze in 60. We had to use every trick in the book to make it work. We used reverse to line up on the runway. When this pole was abeam the cockpit, the main wheels were 2 meters from the runway end. We used RTO power and V2 instead of the usual V2 plus 5 knots. Every little bit counted. It was flying at its purest, and its most demanding. Caticlan was a busy place back then. Cebu Pacific alone had up to 15 arrivals a day. All the airlines flying were PAL Express using de Havilland Canada Q300, Southeast Asian Airlines, Zest Air, with the LET 410 and Dornier 328, and Asian Spirit, which operated BAE 146 and Dash 7. In 2008, Asian Spirit rebranded as Zest Air and started flying the Chinese-built MA60. Now, the MA60 has a decent runway performance. It could get off short strips pretty well, but once it was airborne, it didn't exactly shine. I remember noticing how Zest Air's MA60s would cruise way below us, and they were so slow that we could literally fly circles around them. The funny thing is, the MA60 uses the same engines as the ATR-72, the Pratt & Whitney 127, producing 2,750 horsepower. But cruising at lower altitudes, the MA60 burned much more fuel, and with the ATR-72 having about 10 more seats than the MA60, the operating cost per seat kilometer on the MA60 was much higher. Not exactly a winning formula for an airline trying to stay competitive. In January 2009, something serious happened at Caticlan. An MA60 came in for landing but hit the runway short, bounced and slammed down so hard that the left main landing gear strut punched right through the wing and collapsed. The plane skidded off the runway, went over a ditch and crashed into a concrete wall. Just behind the wall, there was a full apron of aircraft, including one ATR-72 packed with passengers and engines running. The MA60 was built like a tank, and that probably saved many lives, although several people were still injured. Then in June 2009, another MA60 overshot the runway while trying to land at Caticlan. The damage was minor, but the consequences were far from small. The Philippine Civil Aviation Authority immediately banned all aircraft from departing runway 06 towards the hill and landing on runway 24 over the hill. With a 10-knot tailwind, we could only carry 5 passengers out from runway 24. It was almost a joke. Eventually, after some time, the CAA allowed operations to resume, but the damage was done. Zest Air eventually ditched the MA60s and shifted focus to the Airbus 320. The airline is now part of the AirAsia group. As for Caticlan, things changed drastically. They removed the hill, extended the runway to 1800 meters, and built a brand new terminal. The upgraded airport opened in 2016, and it's now a whole different ballgame for airlines operating there. A few years ago, I met an ATR captain who had actually flown the MA60. And let me tell you, his story could have been plucked straight from a disaster movie. Once upon a time, he was offered a job to ferry the aircraft from the factory in China to Africa. Now, most sane people would run a mile from that offer, but not this guy. With the enthusiasm of someone who'd never read the safety briefing, he said, "Yes, I'll do it." And off to China he went. When he arrived, he asked about the typewriting training. The response? "You fly the ATR-72, don't you?" "Yes." "Good. This aircraft has the same engines and instruments. No need for more training. You're flying tomorrow. An engineer will explain the systems on the way." And just like that, he was off, flying an aircraft he knew nothing about, with an engineer in the back trying to explain how to keep it from falling out of the sky. Then, after 3 ferry flights in total, they asked him to do another flight. He flat out refused. As he told me, "I have used up all my luck." If you have been following my adventures for a while, you probably know that I am currently flying in Fiji. One of our destinations is Tonga. The main airport is Fuamotu International Airport, which serves Nuku'alofa, the capital of Tonga. In case you are not familiar with it, Tonga is a beautiful Polynesian kingdom made out of 170 islands scattered across the South Pacific. It's home to about 100,000 people and has become a favorite holiday spot, especially from travelers from New Zealand and Australia. Honestly, it's not hard to see why. It's a paradise. When you land at Fuamotu Airport, you will probably spot an MA60 parked outside the hangar. And trust me, this plane has quite a story. Tonga's aviation history has been a bit rocky, to say the least, with 11 domestic airlines having come and gone over the years. To keep things moving, a New Zealand airline called Xi'an Pacific had been flying sub-340s between Fuamotu and Vava'u since 2007. Vava'u, by the way, is a hotspot for whale watching and yacht charters. Definitely worth a visit. Things took a big turn in 2013 when China gifted Tonga an MA60 and a Harbin Y-12 aircraft. With that, a brand new airline called Real Tonga was born, launching flights on March the 4th. They even added a sub-340 to their fleet later on. Seeing they could not compete with a government-backed airline, Xi'an Pacific shut down all their operations just 2 days before Real Tonga's first flight. But the drama didn't stop there. A few months later, New Zealand suspended 10 million New Zealand dollars in aid to Tonga. In August 2013, the New Zealand government also issued a statement advising tourists not to travel on Real Tonga's MA60s, on the grounds that is, quote, "This aircraft has been involved in a significant number of accidents in the last few years, and the type is not certified to fly in New Zealand on other comparable jurisdictions," end quote. Because Vava'u, Tonga's main tourist hotspot up in the Northern Islands, can only be reached by domestic flights from the capital, Nuku'alofa, the shake-up in air travel had a big economic impact. Tourist numbers took a serious hit. In 2015, the Tongan government decided to tighten up its aviation standards by adopting New Zealand civil aviation regulations. The MA60, unfortunately, didn't meet the new certification requirements and was grounded. There was talk for a while about bringing the MA60 back into service, but in the end, both the MA60 and the Y-12s were returned to the Tongan government. That left just one plane in operations, the reliable sub-340. But even that didn't last. In 2020, the sub suffered a bird strike and was grounded. And just like that, Real Tonga became part of aviation history. The Tongan government formed a new company, Thai Airlines, and it started operations with the Sub 340 and Y12, previously used by Real Tonga. In 2023, the Sub needed major maintenance work, and an ATR-72 was leased from Fiji Link for a few months. Thai Airways is still in operation, offering 2 or 3 flights to Vava'u per day. They also operate the Y12 and a Twin Otter. Last time I visited Fuamoto Airport, that was in April, air shutdown was back, providing backup for Thai Sub, which needed maintenance. And yes, the MA60 is still sitting there, collecting moss. Now, even though the MA60 has built up a bit of bad reputation when it comes to safety, it's not actually a dangerous aircraft. Its real downfall was poor performance and lack of solid customer support, not any major design flaws. If you are looking to get to Vava'u, you can also fly there from Nandi in Fiji with Fiji Link. Here is what it looks like coming in for landing. It's pretty spectacular. Before I wrap up, a huge shout out to my amazing subscribers. They get early access to this video 2 days before anyone else, totally ad-free. They also get to join in on live streams, Zoom hangouts, and even chat in a private WhatsApp group. Thanks for being part of the journey. And thank you for watching, have a wonderful day, and happy landing!
$50, $40,